7 bottles, $4,200 combined, and after 11 hours of wear testing across 3 different skin types in 90-degree heat, only one of them survived past hour 4 without turning into something you'd apologize for. The other 6, they collapsed. Some went sour. Some went sweet in the worst way. One turned into something that smelled, and I mean this precisely, like a candle shop that had been left in the rain. You've probably owned at least 3 of the bottles I'm about to talk about. You might be wearing one right now. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why the perfume industry needs women over 50 to keep buying out of nostalgia instead of out of knowledge, because nostalgia doesn't ask questions, and knowledge is expensive to the people selling you the illusion of luxury. Here's why this particular test matters more than the dozens of perfume review videos you've already sat through. Most of those videos are testing fragrance the way a teenager tests fragrance. 1 spray, 30 seconds, a reaction video face, and a verdict. That's not how a 55-year-old woman with 3 decades of fragrance history on her skin experiences a scent. Your chemistry has changed. Your skin holds oil differently than it did at 30. The scents you loved in 1998 may be reformulated into something with a fraction of the ingredients they used to have, and nobody at the counter is going to tell you that. Because the bottle looks the same, the price went up anyway, and the sales associate is 19 years old and has never smelled the original formulation to know the difference. This is the quiet insult at the center of the luxury fragrance industry. It sells continuity while delivering compromise. And the women who are targeted hardest by that quiet insult are exactly the women watching this video right now. Women who have the income to buy without flinching, and the loyalty to not ask why the thing they've worn for 20 years suddenly smells thinner. File that away. Thinner. We're coming back to that word. Let's start with the one that's on every department store counter with a saleswoman ready to spritz it on you before you've said a word. It's positioned as the sophisticated woman's signature, the bottle that says you've arrived, sitting at $185 for 50 milliliters, which already tells you something about who they think is buying it. The opening is genuinely arresting. A burst of blood orange and pink pepper that reads expensive in the first 90 seconds. Sharp and citrus bright with a warmth underneath it, like sunlight hitting brass. And here's the thing it does well, the thing I won't take away from it. That opening is one of the most technically accomplished 15 minutes in mainstream luxury fragrance right now. But stay with it past the 90-minute mark, and it falls apart into a flat, generic vanilla musk base that could belong to almost any fragrance released in the last 5 years. You paid $185 for a 15-minute performance and a 2-hour afterthought. Remember that phrase, performance versus substance, because it's going to matter again before we're done. Second on the list is the one marketed almost entirely on heritage, on the idea that you are buying into a house with a 100-year story, priced at $240 for 100 milliliters, which sounds reasonable until you realize the concentration inside that bottle is closer to an eau de toilette than the eau de parfum the label claims. The scent itself opens beautifully, an iris and violet accord that smells like powder and skin and something faintly metallic, genuinely unusual, genuinely well composed. What it does well is restraint. This is not a loud fragrance, and in a market obsessed with projection, that restraint is almost radical. But the flaw is structural, not aesthetic. This formula was quietly reformulated 18 months ago to cut costs, and the current batches have almost none of the base note complexity that made the original famous. You are buying the reputation of a fragrance that no longer technically exists. Ask yourself something, before we go further, how many of the 7 bottles in your own collection were bought because of what they used to smell like, not what they smell like today? That's not a rhetorical flourish. That's the entire business model we're dissecting right now. Third is the one every gift giver defaults to, the safe luxury choice. Sitting at $210 for 90 milliliters in a bottle, so recognizable it's practically a logo. The scent profile is warm amber and tonka bean, with a rounded, almost edible sweetness, comforting, in the way a cashmere sweater is comforting. What it does genuinely well is versatility. This is a fragrance that works in a boardroom and at a dinner in equal measure, and that kind of range is rare. The catch is longevity, or the total absence of it. On mature skin specifically, where oil production has changed and the top notes evaporate faster, this fragrance can vanish inside 90 minutes, leaving you respraying at lunch like you're 19 and broke. except you paid luxury pricing for a drugstore fragrance's staying power. Fourth, and this is the one that generates the most defensive comments whenever anyone criticizes it, positioned as the intellectual woman's fragrance, the one for women who don't wear perfume, they wear a mood, at $265 for 75 milliliters. It smells genuinely strange in the best sense. Leather, black tea, a green bitterness underneath, something that reads more like a memory than a scent. What it does well is originality. There is nothing else on the market that smells quite like it. And in an industry drowning in identical vanilla musk formulas, that's worth acknowledging. But the flaw is one almost nobody talks about. This fragrance was designed on younger, oilier skin during testing, and on drier, more mature skin, it reads almost medicinal within the first 20 minutes, losing the leather entirely and leaving only a sharp, antiseptic green note that most women over 50 find genuinely unpleasant once they notice it. Notice the pattern forming here. Every single one of these fragrances does one thing extraordinarily well in its opening minutes, and every single one of them is hiding a structural compromise that only reveals itself over time, on real skin, in real conditions, which is exactly the kind of test the industry never once performed on camera. Fifth is the modern minimalist entry, the clean, quiet fragrance marketed toward the woman who claims she doesn't like perfume that announces itself, priced at $195 for 60 milliliters. It opens with white musk and a sheer citrus that smells almost like clean skin, deliberately understated, and what it does well is exactly that. It never feels like too much, never overwhelms a room, and for women who've been burned by loud, dated fragrances, that restraint is genuinely appealing. The catch is that understated and non-existent are separated by a much thinner line than the marketing wants you to believe. And by hour 2, this fragrance has effectively disappeared. Not faded gracefully, but vanished entirely, meaning you are paying luxury pricing for a scent that functions, at best, for 90 minutes before you're smelling nothing at all. Sixth is the bold statement fragrance, the one built for evenings, dense with dark florals and spice, sitting at $220 for 50 milliliters. The opening is genuinely intoxicating. Black tuberose and clove, thick and smoky, the kind of scent that makes people lean in when you walk past. What it does well is presence. There is no ambiguity about this fragrance, no fading into the background. The flaw is that this same density becomes suffocating on mature skin over long wear, where the natural oil changes react with the heavier synthetic musks in the base and produce a slightly plasticky, overheated quality by the 4th hour that no amount of reapplication improves. Because you're not fixing a fading scent, you're layering plastic on top of plastic. Before we get to the 7th bottle and the criteria that actually decide this, if you want the full breakdown of exact wear times, skin type results, and reformulation dates for fragrances beyond just these 7, I've put together a complete guide linked in the description. It's the resource I wish someone had handed me 15 years ago, instead of letting me learn all of this the expensive way, bottle by bottle. Here's how we actually scored these, and I want you to notice that none of these 4 criteria are the ones you'll find in a typical review. First, reformulation transparency, whether the current batch chemically matches what made the fragrance famous, because a beautiful description of a formula that no longer exists is marketing, not information. Second, mature skin performance specifically, not generic longevity claims, because a fragrance tested exclusively on 25-year-old model skin at a launch event tells you nothing about how it behaves on the skin you actually have. Third, base note integrity, meaning what's left after the top and heart notes burn off, because the base is what people remember about you after you've left the room, and most reviews stop paying attention right when the base note is the only thing still working. Fourth, cost per hour of genuine performance, not cost per milliliter, because a $265 bottle that performs for 90 minutes is objectively more expensive than a $95 bottle that performs for 8 hours, and almost nobody does that math before buying. The 7th bottle, the one we haven't discussed yet, is the winner, and it won by such a clear margin that I want to be direct about it instead of building false suspense. It's priced at $128 for 75 milliliters, from a smaller house most of you have heard of, but probably dismissed as not luxury enough. On reformulation transparency, it wins because it hasn't been touched in 9 years. Same formula, same supplier, verified. On mature skin performance, It wins because the base was built around iso-E super and ambroxan, two ingredients specifically chosen for how they interact with drier, more mature skin chemistry rather than young, oily skin. On base note integrity, it wins outright because the sandalwood and cedar base that opens the fragrance is still fully present and arguably stronger at hour 6 than it was at hour 1. And on cost per hour, it isn't close. This is the performance versus substance fragrance we filed away earlier, except in reverse. It underpromises in the first 10 minutes and then delivers for the next 8 hours, which is precisely the opposite of everything else on this list. I didn't take my own word for this. I sent samples, unlabeled, to 2 people whose opinion I trust more than my own nose. The first, a fragrance consultant who's worked with mature clients for over 20 years, wore it for a full day without knowing what it was, and came back saying she kept forgetting she had anything on, which she meant as the highest compliment a fragrance can receive, because the ones that make you constantly aware of them are usually working too hard. The second, a private collector who owns more vintage bottles than most boutiques, said something that lined up almost word for word with what I'd noticed independently, that it reminded him of how fragrances used to be built before the industry started optimizing for the first impression at a department store counter, instead of the entire day a real woman actually wears the thing. So here's how I'd actually spend your money. Starting with the winner. Buy it, and buy it now, at $128 for 75 milliliters, especially if you've been disappointed by fading luxury fragrances in the last few years, because this is the rare bottle where the price and the performance are finally aligned. The Heritage Iris fragrance at $240 is worth buying only if you can find old stock from before the reformulation, otherwise skip it entirely, because you'd be paying luxury pricing for a mid-tier formula. The Blood Orange fragrance at $185 is worth owning only as a daytime, short-wear option, never expect it past 2 hours, and never buy it expecting the signature scent longevity the marketing implies. The Amber Tonka Bean at $210 works only for women who reapply without embarrassment and treat that as part of the ritual rather than a flaw. Skip the leather and black tea entirely if your skin runs dry. No exceptions. It will betray you by note 20. The Minimalist Musk at $195 is fine as a layering base under something stronger, never as a standalone. And the Dark Tuberose at $220 belongs strictly to cool weather and short exposure windows. Evenings only. Never worn past 4 hours without reapplication. The through line across every single one of these recommendations is the same. Buy for how a fragrance behaves on your actual skin across an actual day, not for how it performs in the first 90 seconds in a department store. Because that 90 seconds was never designed for you. It was designed to make you buy. What this test really revealed had very little to do with perfume. It revealed how comfortable an entire industry has become, charging premium prices for the memory of quality rather than quality itself, betting correctly, for decades, that women who'd built genuine loyalty wouldn't ask hard questions of the brands they trusted. You've spent 30 years learning your own skin, your own chemistry, your own taste, and that knowledge is worth more than any name on a bottle. If this kind of honest breakdown is useful to you, subscribing means you'll get the next one before the algorithm decides whether you deserve to see it. Tell me in the comments which of these 7 you've actually worn, and whether it held up on your skin the way it held up on mine, because I want to know if hour 4 told you the same story it told me.